The past little while has occurred to me that there's something very interesting going on at the very limits of our understanding. And even in framing it this way, it shows a certain way, the certain way that I'm approaching these questions. But in particular, I wanted to think in terms of one question, and that is, what has happened to natural philosophy? When I say natural philosophy, I mean, first of all, an activity that people seem to think has been utterly, that we've grown out of, and it seemed to have moved to the dustbin. And in large part, that's because of our scientific understanding. And through the scientific revolution, we've moved beyond the need to be like Aristotle was, or like certain other interested voices in these concerns, natural philosophers. And so I'm kind of curious what's happened with regard to natural philosophy. In particular, where people think natural philosophy has just been utterly swept away and where it still creeps in. And so you can see this, at least I think, in certain conceptions of people. When we talk about the physical universe, we talk about the models that make up that universe and the way we conceive of the universe. These are all one thing. These are all scientific domains, and these are all the subject of authorities of nature, essentially. Authorities of technoscience telling us precisely what to think about these things and our relationship to them, and how our intuitions with regard to our relationship to nature are often flawed and romanticized in various ways and whatnot. But when we get down to the very bottom of this question, or when we get to the very top of the question, essentially what I'm saying is when we get to the very limits of our understanding, where there's no adequate answer as to the boundary of that understanding even, or there's an arbitrary cutoff, this is what science says and that's simply it. Like, think of the grandest conception, reality itself. It seems to speak on this question, or the very most minute, the most pierced components of the universe, through our technical observations. And the heights of empiricism, the grandest things that we can hope to see or experience or use in order to make light of our concerns in these matters, it seems inescapable that there we are doing natural philosophy. And I'd like to know if anyone disagrees about this. But it seems inevitable to me that to question the furtherance of the scientific enterprise and to be skeptical about science and all these things need not be the direct question here. We need to absorb and understand the use and the absolute applicability of science to this question of natural philosophy. But I think that natural philosophy is something that is very much not left behind in any kind of historical dustbin. It's more so the case that more than ever we need now to recognize where we're doing natural philosophy and where we're doing science. And it's the theoretical physicists who are telling us their natural philosophies without telling us. It's the, well, name any expert you want. It's the people giving the grand narrative of the entirety of how a materialist or a physicalist account can really give us a full conception of reality. But in order to take a step in this direction, first of all, what's the driving force of that step? Second of all, where do we actually end up? It seems like the activity in the middle can be a scientific enterprise, but who's doing the science? And what is the science ultimately for? There doesn't need to be some grand telos of the universe to ask that question, but to be the embedded natural agents we are, and to take on as an assumption our conscious experience? These are grand questions that scientific paradigms don't even intend to answer. An evolutionary account can give us that, but then what encapsulates that entire account? And these are just questions that are just formulatable due to this, I think, inescapable nature of natural philosophy in these questions. If anything, it's more about being curious at the very limits of our knowledge and the limitations that we impose on the experiential universe by piercing the depths and the heights. And in that way, that curiosity, I think, is only invited by natural philosophy. And when people are bad natural philosophers but good scientists, I don't know if there's a consensus on we have to be bad natural philosophers in order to do good science. But it seems to me there must be some kind of work around or dialogue between these two essential, honestly, communities. Thanks.